So we do know that Councillor Zant will be a little delayed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Just let me know when we're ready to broadcast.
I think I'm pretty much good to go. We good?
Just waiting to see if attendees can join yet. Yep.
All set?
Yep, we're broadcasting.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I will call to order Committee of the Whole meeting number 206 for September 1st, 2020. And in honor of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. This meeting of council is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Council members or committee members will be involved in and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. Recording the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Council members attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting, so this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. For clarity, if a council member does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video feed for an extended period, their video feed remains turned on, and it is unclear to staff whether they are present, the council member will be, or committee member will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the committee member to reappear in the video feed. And there you have it. With that, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes.
Seconded by Councillor Noble. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole 205, April 7th. That was our last one. Wow. Moved by
Yep.
Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Which will lead us right into, we have a delegation from Mr. Clark, the Pemberton Valley Diking District Operations and Maintenance Manager. So I'm assuming we're out there. Yes. Hello, Mr. Clark.
Oh, there we go. Can everybody hear me?
That. And I've already given you a really big introduction. You probably missed it, but you could take it whenever you're ready.
Oh, so it's mine to let down. All right. Just going to share my screen here. Let me know if everybody can see that or not.
Yes.
So I guess I was going to give an update on kind of where we're at and what we're doing this year and kind of a future outlook, so everybody's on the same page. Oh, there we go. So I kind of started out with the current dike infrastructure report. Presently, the return periods are listed at these flow rates, which are subject to interpretation, but they are the most up-to-date flow rates that we have. So if you look at the return period in years, 50, 100, 200, that's the flow we would see at the Lillooet River gauge in the event of a flood that would happen roughly on those time periods. This year, the highest flows we've seen were 529 on June 24th and 602 on August 21st. The August 21st return period was just over the 2-year return period. So that corresponds to our current freeboard estimates, which is what would the flow rate be for our dikes to be overtopped or very close to overtopping. So I kind of threw them up here just so everybody can see how that works. So the Airport Road Dike B would be the first one to overtop, as we've seen in the past, at 750. And then it all goes up from there. Now there's a couple that are in asterisks there. The Ryan Dike at 800, that can overtop much sooner, but being as this is based off of Lillooet River flows and not Ryan River flows, The Ryan dike can overtop just from the Ryan without the Lillooet's help. And then all the way down at the bottom, same with the Birkenhead. But in the context of the NHC report that generated these numbers, it was, where is the Lillooet in river? Because you have to pick one.
Kevin, where's the Nissuch?
That dike goes from almost where the Lillooet River goes into the lake and follows IR8 on the bottom side and then terminates up kind of near Rancherie. I actually haven't been down there yet, but it's on the list.
Thanks.
So a couple important notes about freeboard, because everybody, people I talk to around town have different ideas on what that actually means. And everybody always really concentrates on the Lillooet River. And so it's important to note that all the rivers in the past have all overtopped at some point, and the Lillooet River wasn't close to overtopping its banks. So the Green, the Ryan, the Miller, and the Birkenhead all can overtop, and the Lillooet's not. So that's an important one to remember. And case in point, was that 2 Fridays ago, August 21st, the Ryan River was 2.5 feet from going over the road into there was a wedding pre-reception dinner going on at the Red Barn. So that was an interesting evening. The other interesting thing that I've figured out is that the Lillooet flow is not necessarily the flow we have to worry about. So that flow on Friday night, under the Forest Service Bridge up on the Hurley, the river was flowing at 369 cubic meters a second. But down after the Rhine and the Miller came into it, it was flowing at 602. So that means that the Ryan and Miller Creeks were adding 233 cubic meters per second. So the Lillooet was not in danger that day, but the Ryan and the Miller both were. And then the Green River also was flowing at near top of bank capacity behind the golf courses. The one thing that did save us in point 4 there is that the Lillooet Lake had gone down after the freshet. So it was probably about 1.5 meters to 2 meters below where it was. So we were lucky because the lake had a lot of room in it. So a couple of things about freeboard when we're talking about it. Freeboard changes, obviously, as you go up the valley, you gain elevation versus the lake. So the areas that have the lowest freeboard number should be concentrated on for future, when we're talking about where to look next for projects. And the main areas are Mount Currie, the industrial park, and the surrounding areas, and Airport Road. And the Airport Road one's interesting to me because that's where our search and rescue is based out of. So context needs to be given to projects that are in the return period that all of our dikes basically protect us from. So if we look at a return period of a 50-year flood, that's about the point where most of the dikes would be in trouble. So when we're looking at future projects, we have to focus, or we should focus on projects that protect the areas that have sub 50-year protection. So that would take the nuisance flooding away. So the low-lying areas of Lillooet property, the low-lying areas around Grandmother Slough, the low-lying areas down on the south side of the road by the industrial park and the industrial park itself. The one possible exception would be a case could be made to raise the Miller Lillooet Dike C, which is the one that protects town. However, you would transfer some risk around and you may cause some strain among the other policymakers with our relationship with them. But there is definitely a case to be made there. The other important thing is that there's 4 major flood risks that don't involve dikes. So the 4 major ones are the Arn Canal. So that is where the Arn Canal passes through Pemberton Creek Dike. And on August 21st, we were within about, I'd say, 1.5 feet of the backside of the peaks and Pioneer starting to get wet. And that was not from the rain. It was from the Lillooet River leaking backwards through the gates. If those gates didn't leak, we would have had 0 flood risk in the valley, even with the Lillooet flowing at the river at the rate that it was. We have applied for a grant funding for that, which I'll get into next. Grandmother Slough has the same issue as the Arn Canal does: aging infrastructure, leaking gates, vegetation overgrowth, and major beaver problems. North Arm Channel, so at the bottom it goes between IR2 and North Arm Farm, and that drains the whole area, Sunridge, that whole area, the old Pemberton Music Festival grounds, the whole industrial park. It's a massive drainage area. It also, if it gets too high, it backs up into Grandmother Slough and vice versa through the ditch that goes through the middle of the industrial park. And that has all the same issues as the above two, and as well as it was built in a hurry after it blew out in the 2003 flood. So it's mostly built out of big rocks, and it leaks quite badly. Not just the gates and the culverts, the actual mound of dirt leaks water through it. The last one is, I call it the Gannon Ditch. It's at the corner of Clover and Fraser Road, and that drains all that farmland area. And it also has a leaking gate that lets the Lillooet flow backwards into that area. So where we're at with each of those is, because the Miller Dike C was unable to be built due to seismic concerns that we wouldn't be approved, we've reapplied for the funding to do the Arn Canal outlet. The estimated cost is about $900,000, and I'm working on the funder came back with some questions on Friday, so I'm just working on answering those questions now. So hopefully we get an answer on that Arn funding pretty quick. If we're successful, then we really have to hammer through the paperwork, because we have to have the money spent by October next year. And some of the paperwork, especially the Section 11, which is allowing us, that's the Department of Fisheries in Flinroe, that can take 12 to 16 months. So we are right to the wire, but we have preemptively applied for that permit. And so we have our spot in the queue. Grandmother Slough, we're working with Lillooet right now on, they have some possible funding. We can work with them on a study to figure out what to do there. It's just very overgrown, has beaver issues, has major grass overgrowth, and we just have to come up with a plan for that. North Arm Channel, I have an estimate for a new outlet in that area for about $350,000, and during the PVEMC meeting, we're going to recommend that that's one of the funding streams that we go after and for that project this year. As with the Arn Canal, we were very close to flooding there twice this year, not from the rain from inside the canal. It was all coming backwards from the river. The Gannon Ditch only needs 1 valve, and if we have enough budget left over near the end of the year, which hopefully if we don't have any big events, we will, then I'm going to recommend to the board that we just purchase the gate and put that on ourselves, because that's just 1 gate, and it would be a big help. So the other projects that we're looking at, and for information, there's 4 gauges on the various rivers. The Lillooet Early Warning System, which was put in by Lillooet, the village, SLRD, and the Diking District after the Mount Meager slide. So the 4 policymakers actually fund that. And so every year there's a cost to having that gauge. Then on the Lillooet River, Pemberton Creek, Lillooet Lake, they're maintained by the Water Survey of Canada, which is at no cost to us in the valley here. I guess it is by our provincial taxes, but not our valley taxes. So the gauges we need are the Ryan, the Miller, and the Green, because like I said before, the Lillooet wasn't the issue the Ryan and the Green were, and we don't have gauges, so we have no idea what's happening on those rivers other than driving out and actually looking. Lillooet has been successful, and they're installing a gauge on the Birkenhead, and the Diking District's working with them and NHC and Ecofish to integrate it into our early warning system. I should have a phone call tomorrow to start working on that. The Diking District may have to input some money into that to get it with our operations and maintenance manual program that we're working towards, just so we all get alerts when things happen. To put that into context, the gauge locations here in red, these are where the existing gauges are, and the purple would be where the new gauges are. And the Green, the Miller, and the Ryan would have a higher flow rate than the Lillooet would. So we really need to know that, because that would be, it would severely affect our ability to call for an evacuation under today's circumstances without sending people out into the field. And it's usually in the middle of the night and raining. So why more gauges? The River Forecast Center has to use these gauges to give us a forecast. And like I just said, the sum of those three rivers, the River Forecast can't see them. So they are not part of their flood forecasting model. It will give the Diking District a much better chance of evaluating and evacuating to get the forecast correct, because we definitely don't want to call for an evacuation and then have nothing happen. People just lose confidence in that. It will also make the planning sequence for evacuation, because the low-lying area around Grandmother Slough, where Highway 99 passes over it, would most likely be already underwater by the time the 750 cubic meters per second is hit on the existing trigger point, which means that we don't have an evacuation point to the north, and any properties to the north would already be basically orphaned there. I think I just doubled up there. Yeah, okay. The other big thing is that it doesn't necessarily rain over all the drainages at once. So it can be raining over the Ryan River drainage, but not over the Birkenhead, or maybe not over the Lillooet. So I can't stress enough how much we really are riding a bit blind on a lot of these drainages that input a lot more water than I think, even in discussions with the River Forecast Center, they had to rethink about it. We had two conference calls back to back just to reevaluate this. So we are applying for funding, or hopefully applying for funding this fall to install those three gauges. And I've been working with the River Forecast Center and the Water Survey of Canada to see if we can collaborate, maybe share some costs, because they would like the data. And if we can share the cost of installing and maintaining, that'll lower the cost for the SLRD, the village, the Diking District, and Lillooet. So we'll see where that goes. But they're very interested, but they have to work within the constraints of their jobs too. Working with the River Forecast Center over the freshet and the last two high water events that were just caused by rain, we learned a bunch of things. And like I said, the reason why the River Forecast, another reason why the River Forecast Center does not have good river forecasting in our area, which is their words, is because they only have the weather station at the airport to pull rain data from. So they don't know what's happening over the headwaters of the Ryan or the Lillooet, which are our biggest two flood concerns. So they've been out by as much as 50% in the past, and that happened in November 9th, 2016, when they forecast the peak to be 770 meters cubed per second, and it peaked at 1,400. So that's how much, and I can't stress this, the trigger points that the River Forecast Center put out in the past is what the village and the SLRD have used as a trigger point for evacuation or a task number. And this illustrates that what we see here in the valley is much more important to make those decisions, and we can't rely on that River Forecast Center forecast. Oh, 1 Mile Lake, sewage outfall, and working with the village. The village and the Diking District have been working together. it's been great. I've started new jobs before and kind of felt alienated, but both Tom, Dave Ward, everybody around has just been a pleasure to work with, and I really find that as a confidence builder going forward. They've done several little jobs for the Diking District with the backhoe here and there, and then we lent them the excavator to do the 1 Mile Lake Inlet project. The Diking District installed the silt fence for the village for the sewage outfall project. And I kind of got to thinking about how to work together and explore an equipment sharing going forward, because then we wouldn't have to double up on equipment. We've purchased a wood chipper for the back of our tractor, which can chip up to 8-inch logs. And talking with a few of the village workers, they would really like access to that, which I don't, and the board doesn't have a problem with. And we've used the excavator quite extensively this year. So it's something to think about. It's a cost sharing thing between the two entities in the valley for sure, that might lead us to have more equipment or more different kinds of equipment without doubling up. A couple obstacles for future projects that I just wanted to point out. Without a right-of-way on the dike on a private property, you cannot use provincial funds to do that project because the province sees the dike as an asset. And if the Diking District or whoever is administrating that asset, if we don't have the right to go access that asset and maintain it, then they're not interested in putting money into it and having it just fall apart. So there's the Miller Lillooet Dike C, there's 2 property owners owning a total of 3 properties all in a row, and they will not sign. I'm on good talking terms with them, but they've dug their heels in, and they will not sign for various different reasons. So we definitely need to have the conversation in the PVEMC committee about how to apply pressure or start looking at expropriation, because there's no moving forward from where we're at right now. I'm hoping that we actually have a decent high water event that causes no damage, but at least it gets high in their front yard. So at least we can have a good discussion and say, see how close that was. Because from my perspective, I don't have a lot of negotiating power. I say, can I get a right of way on your property? And they say, no, like we have nothing to offer them. So that complicates things for sure. And with where those 2 properties or 3 properties and 2 owners, where it's situated in the Miller Lillooet Dike project is almost in the middle. So that means that doing that project is essentially a no-go, because with that hole in the middle, it would achieve nothing of what we need. The province has also indicated that they don't have much appetite to spend any meaningful amounts of money in the valley. So we definitely need as a group to start lobbying them to do so. And admittedly, I come from private business, so I'm learning as fast as I can how to work the lobbying world, but it's definitely any help that anyone can give me, let me know. So kind of next steps, we as a group need to make a long-term plan and vision for the valley. This will aid in future project planning and give me and the board kind of our direction on what we all want to see done. And I think this is important because if we agree on it, then there's less likelihood to have animosity about doing one project over another. We also need to improve our response plan as the valley conditions change. As we do surveys and sediment removals, flood risk will move around, and it'll be up to us to make sure that we're on top of that. And as I said, the Diking District needs to focus on projects that are below the 50-year return period, because anything above that, we're just going to flood over the next dike over. So it's not as important as we once thought. And we really need to get back to doing basic maintenance and vegetation management that have fallen behind in lieu of chasing these bigger projects that now that we have this new freeboard assessment, we realize that unless we built 44 kilometers of higher dike, it doesn't really offer that much more protection. I think we need to explore a setback dike around Mount Currie, the industrial park and surrounding areas. This would be a big effort, but it would bring that area up to the 50-year so that essentially the entire valley would have roughly the same return period protection. Obviously, there's outliers depending on what river goes high. One last thing is the Ministry of Transport. They're a very tough nut to crack. I've been on them quite extensively to start working with this to reduce the flood risk in the areas where their road and is what's essentially outside of our control is the flood problem. So those areas are the Airport Road, Highway 99 in Mount Currie, the culverts under the road at Riverlands, and the Highway 99 bridge at Pemberton. The one thing I did forget to leave off here is the 3 culverts that go through the dike under the railroad tracks on the Arn Canal, kind of at the backside of Frontier Street. And I am meeting with CN Rail on September 13th about that, because we've seemed to be having good dialogue about them possibly fixing those culverts. So we'll see where that goes, but they're a potential flood risk as well. But other than that, does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Kevin. That was a great report. Super thorough, super informative. I got a couple thoughts, but I'm going to open it to the rest of the committee. Anybody have questions? There you go. There you go, Councillor Craddock. You're on mute. Still on mute.
How
There you
about
go.
that?
Okay, you're good.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin, for the report. As usual, I enjoy it. One thing that you didn't talk about during your presentation, Pemberton Creek. Does it not impact the community that much? I know it goes into the green, but you didn't talk about gauges or any situation with that.
Pemberton Creek has an existing Water Survey of Canada gauge. And the reason I left it out was because the Water Survey of Canada actually is in the process of upgrading that gauge. They're putting a water velocity camera to actually log the water velocity as it's going under the bridge, because we know that as the river flow increases, so does the velocity. On the Lillooet River, because it's so big, it doesn't really speed up that much. But on Pemberton Creek, it does. So we know that once we get above, say, 15 cubic meters per second, it's running at like 3 cubic meters today, to put that into context. And that we know that we're wrong on the readout. But the Water Survey of Canada picked Pemberton Creek of every creek possible in Canada to install this camera. We're the only one. So that's why I left that one out, because it's already in progress.
Thank you. And the second question, if I might, Mayor Richmond, is we talked about shared cost, maintenance, insurance on some equipment. Do you think in the future you could give us a report on what type of equipment we have and you have that we can do that with?
Sorry, was that directed at me?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're in the process of upgrading all our equipment at all times, but yep, I can send something out. I mean, we don't have a lot to begin with, but it just seems like a good discussion to start down. So yeah, I can take care of that.
Yeah, that'd be great, because it's at the end of the day, it's all the same taxpayer paying for the diking district and the village of Pemberton. So anytime we can have one piece of equipment for both parties and have a reasonable user pay, then I think it's a wise thing to do. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Antonelli.
I have some comments. Are we just doing questions now?
No, we can go both right now. We're good.
Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation. I think it's really interesting. I hope lots of people from the village of Pemberton are listening right now. One thing that really stuck out to me was that the province doesn't want to provide significant funding to the valley. And, looking at the scope of our flooding issues, I think it's really important that we focus on non-dike solutions. And so, I would leave that up to the experts, but maybe it's tiger berms or whatever it is. But we really need to consider that. And also we really need to look at that in our planning. So whatever is going ahead in the region of Teota and whatnot, I think we really need to plan ahead for some big flooding.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
Hi, Kevin. Sorry I was late to the meeting, everyone. Your report was fantastic, so thank you for that. I was just curious, when you mentioned that the PVDD doesn't have any leverage on the right-of-ways or ability to access them, what I'm wondering is, if the dikes were not higher, could that not possibly lower the people's insurance rates who are on that, where the properties reside against the dike? Just thinking of leverage.
Because if your property is behind a
Everybody's
man-made,
frozen.
oh, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Because a dike is a man-made obstacle, from what I've found is that there's very few insurance companies that will even entertain that. So I'm not sure that that leverage would exist. And I also know that both of the property owners do not have flood insurance. So it's not, there's no leverage there.
Right. Any other questions?
Can I just make a comment with respect
Yeah,
to
go
that?
ahead.
I don't think you can't get flood insurance in the valley anyway, because we're in a floodplain. So there would be no opportunity to use that as additional leverage either.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kevin?
I'm just wondering who would have to pursue the expropriation. Would that be everybody as a group or just the Dyking District, or who would have to do that?
My knowledge from expropriation is obviously the individual, you would secure right of way as a result of that. So the person who requires access to maintain would be responsible for pursuing that. I mean, doing it, having conversations together to try to get the parties on board. But there's usually some type of compensation as far as a fair market appraised value that you would be on the piece of property that you'd be taking in as a right of way that you would need to pay the property owner. But it's quite a complicated process. There's a lot of hoops and little dances you need to make to get to the finish line. And of course, nobody likes the having to expropriate. But one thing that municipalities have been successful, or other local governments, is that if it's for emergency or infrastructure that is for public safety, there definitely is a little bit more of the ability to take it through to the end from a higher level perspective.
I did reach out to legal counsel on what the probability of success would be, and it's pretty much 100% that we would be successful, because the dike is already there. The property owner knowingly purchased the property with the infrastructure in place. The unknown is timeline and costs, and with the prices of property in the Pemberton Valley, the Dyking District probably doesn't have the money to do it, which is an issue.
Anybody else? Kevin, I just want to say that, since you've been on board, the communication has really improved, and the emails, the reach outs for meetings, this sort of report, the communication has been really a lot better. And on that line, the collaboration too, you talk about shared equipment, your support for some of the projects we've done at the village. I feel like we're in a new era of working together, and I'm really excited. I mean, the PVDD, you guys obviously play a pretty important role there, and we need to work together on all this stuff. Obviously, it impacts all of us, and the stronger that relationship, the better. It's kind of obvious to say, but it's really improved under your leadership. So thank you for the work you're doing. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Get my agenda back up. So next up, we have the draft development procedures bylaw and user guide. Ms. Reese and Ms. Pedrini are joining us on this, so we'll give them a moment to set up. Ms. Pedrini, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you. We can't see you.
Yeah, where's my video? Well, I can work on this if Joanna wants to.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Joanna. Are you leading?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Committee of the Whole. The purpose of this report is to introduce the draft Village of Pemberton Development Procedures Bylaw. The draft Development Procedures Bylaw is required by Section 895 of the Local Government Act to define the procedures under which an owner of land may apply for an amendment to the official community plan or the zoning bylaw, or for the issuance of a permit. This bylaw is also used to set out application fees. Updating the Development Procedures Bylaw was initially brought forward as a department priority in 2016, but it was deferred until this year due to resource limitations. The following significant changes have been made in the new draft bylaw. Firstly, staff have rewritten the bylaw to be clear and succinct. The bylaw was reformatted, references to provincial legislation were updated, and repetitive policies were consolidated. As per Strategic Direction number 8 of the Village of Pemberton Age-Friendly Affordable Housing Action Plan, a policy was included to prioritize applications to develop affordable housing multi-unit buildings with a housing agreement. Staff have completed a fee comparison to compare to local and comparable municipalities, including the Resort Municipality of Whistler, the District of Squamish, Bowen Island Municipality, using an increase in application fees to reflect current costs and to ensure effective cost recovery. It's also important of processing, inspection, advertising, and administration. The new proposed fees are shown in Schedule A of Appendix B. Lined internal processes, the following development permit applications have been included as minor development permits, which are delegated to the Manager of Development Services. Includes minor amendments to major development permits issued by Council, development permits required for site clearing and grading, and development permits under development permit areas 1, 2, and 3 for environmental protection, land constraints, and enhancement of agriculture. Lastly, the detailed application process schedules were removed from the bylaw and are going to be replaced with a user-friendly and accessible guide to development applications. Staff recommend that the Committee of the Whole provide comment regarding the draft development procedures bylaw. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Ms. Reese. Ms. Virginia, did you have anything to add before I open it up? You're on mute. No, you're good. All right, I'll open it up to the committee for questions. Any questions for Ms. Reese on the draft? Councillor Antonelli, then Councillor Craddock.
Can we get some examples of what would be covered under the environmental DP?
Under, sure, one second. I'm just going to pull up our official community plan. Unless, do you know any of, unless you can speak to that, Lisa, as I look this up.
Yeah, so we have a couple of areas designated as environmental protection development permit areas that are close to water bodies. So the riparian area regulations would apply, or there may be other sensitive habitat that has been identified in the official community plan. So for instance, the areas on the hillside, the Sunstone and the Ridge, they've been designated both for environmental protection and land constraints, being, steeper slopes and that sort of thing for land constraints. But yeah, any kind of, like something like the sharp-tailed snake habitat, an area that would be designated for environmental protection.
Right. So, I think it's a good idea for, the implementing the riparian area regulations for that to be delegated. But as far as protecting sensitive habitats on the hillside where it's regarding species at risk, I think that should still come forward to council for our consideration. So I'm wondering if there's some way of parsing that out so that I guess more critical environmental matters council can still review. It won't go straight to the CAO.
It actually goes to me as the manager of development services. Okay. I would be delegated the ability to sign off on those and not the CAO. Yeah, we could distinguish between major and minor development permits for environmental protection and have major come forward to council and minor stay within my capacity to approve.
Reese, did you want to add something?
Yeah. I think also just something important to note and for consideration, and part of the reasoning behind adding this as a delegated authority to the manager of development services is it's just important to keep in mind that development permits are non-discretionary. So if the applicant is meeting all of the guidelines, council or the manager of development services has to issue that permit. And with more technical development permit areas, where the guidelines are very straightforward criteria that are listed, and with environmental development permit areas, they're also required to be submitted by a qualified professional. That's kind of part of the reasoning why they could be delegated, because there isn't that discretionary approval that's a part of it.
Councilor Antonelli, did you want to follow up, or are you good?
Yeah, I think it would still be worthwhile looking at how you can divide that up into more significant environmental impacts and having council look at it.
Thank you. Councilor Craddock?
Thank you, Mayor Richmond. Bottom of page 6, if we just look at that note that talks about multi-unit buildings subject to housing agreements, I'm just wondering, are we going to put that those subjects in this as part of the bylaw? In other words, how do we register it on title for rental properties? For market housing, what's it going to be, a percentage of what the market is at the present time, and how much increase are we going to allow over a number of years? I don't see anything that talks about that, and I'm a little concerned about that. Do we have a provision in some other bylaw, or how are we going to deal with this?
Ms. Pagini?
I'm thinking that maybe it's still yet to be worked out as part of our implementation of our Affordable Housing Action Plan. I'm looking for Nikki's guidance on this.
Well, at this point, we haven't incorporated what that might look like, because we have some of the direction where we're bringing back is looking at some midterm abilities or ranges to, I think Mr. Chalmers said once about if a single family house looks like a single family house from the outside, what would council think about what's happening on the inside? Is it more than one suite? So that there's a bunch of different layers of what we're going to be looking at and bringing forward to test council's acceptance of affordable housing. And of course, that would need to be brought forward through a type of a negotiation or agreement, a discussion on that. We haven't gotten to the end point at this point. At this point, we're referencing the housing agreement, but there are no details behind what exactly that might look like.
I
Could be
guess,
negotiated on a case by case too, right? Depending on the development.
yeah, and I guess that's my concern, Mayor Richmond. Previous council, we tried to put the Tayet in a situation where it'd be affordable for people, but we did not have enough restrictions or foresight to limit the amount of properties an individual or company could buy. So consequently, I don't think we ended up getting what we really wanted out of that site as affordable sites. So I'm really concerned that if we don't have something in place, I don't want it to come at the last minute and then be dealing with it once we've got a developer at the table. So I really hope we take a look at it. I know in Whistler, they've got non-market housing that employees, locals can buy, but the asset improvement can only go up by a percentage of cost of living per year. So that keeps it affordable over for a long period of time. And also with renting, it's some places it's based on 30% of income and others based on other issues. So I really want to make sure that we don't get behind on this and we've got something pretty solid in place. I'm really concerned that we're going to be in another Tayeta situation where we don't have it in place in time and then someone comes forward.
You know, I agree. We have to have those things in place. Again, there's a lot of options and a lot of ways you could do it to control rent in perpetuity, to control price in perpetuity, and it needs to be solid. But I think that's definitely for the Affordable Housing Action Plan rather than this development procedure bylaw. I would think. CEO Gilmore.
Yes, I would agree. We all, I think, even from a staffing perspective, agree that we would have liked to have seen Tayeta come in at much lower prices than they're at when we were thinking about small lots. So that is constantly on the front of our minds. But it depends also on, say, for example, whether there's funding through CMHC and there are certain requirements, or whether or not a developer is coming in independent and taking, say, 5 of the units. So there will be a bit of discussion on a case-by-case basis, but we have not forgotten about that. And we've actually been in some conversation with developers lately, and we do send them all of the affordable action reports and plans that we've done to date. And we've been very clear that there's more to come in the fall and they should stay tuned. So we do make sure that this is a piece of conversation that we have early on in any kind of future development.
Oh, that's great. And I just hope we do follow up with that. I certainly do want to be behind the train when it comes through. Thank you.
Just so you know, I'm got an unstable internet here. I'm freezing up every now and again. So if there's a pregnant pause, it's just because I'm frozen. I'm trying to get back. Any other questions or comments regarding the draft? Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
My question is the way it's maybe just more for clarification for staff, for myself. When I read through the initial, the first page of the report, it appears to me that the draft of the policy is going to replace the current bylaw in its entirety. Is that correct? As it's written?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be a new bylaw.
And then maybe staff can tell me, because on page 11 of the PDF, there was the public hearing. Let me just get there, sorry. 7.4, permit application notification requirements. Council shall hold a public information major development. So publishing notice in at least 2 consecutive issues of the newspaper, and so on. I didn't see that in the draft of the bylaw. I'm wondering if I just missed it, or
It is in the new one. Furthermore, the notice requirement is not something that we would have in our bylaw necessarily. It's a section of the Local Government Act that requires us to place notice in 2 consecutive newspaper ads. But let me see if we can find it. I
Can I
remember reading
speak
that.
to this also? I could add. So yeah, are you looking at policy 7.4, you said?
Yeah, 7.4 alpha.
Yeah, so this is a public information meeting.
Yep.
So typically developers will hold public information meetings as requested by council or staff. So in the new bylaw, instead of having council being responsible for holding some public information meetings, but not others, the applicant would be responsible for holding a public information meeting if that's asked of them. And there is public notice requirements for that public information meeting set out in the new bylaw. It's to send a mail notice to all residents within 100 meters.
Right.
If I can add one more thing, you will recall earlier this year, we did bring forward a report from staff in discussions about early and ongoing community engagement. And that is where we've outlined what staff's recommendations were on holding public information meetings. And we received council support prior to that. And then we work with the applicant in order for them to bring forward that information meeting. We've actually, there's only 2 different mechanisms, I believe, by which they're responsible for advertising. Maybe it's just one, a notice in the paper, but we have always asked the applicant to exceed that. And sorry, I'm not sure, is the mail out also a requirement on the public information?
Yes, so that's included in our bylaw.
Yeah.
Public information meeting. And public information meetings aren't part of the Local Government Act. That's part of the Village of Pemberton's development procedures.
All right, thank you. You've answered my question.
Councillor Antonelli?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And if you recall, some time ago, we had some complaints from the public at the plateau saying that they didn't feel they were adequately informed of development applications going on. And was it the Ridge or Sunstone? I don't recall. But it was, the information meeting was advertised on Facebook only, as far as I recall. So I'm hoping we can get some language in there to ensure that doesn't happen again. So I'm not sure what the problem there was, whether it was the 100-meter distance or our requirements, but hopefully we can look at that and make sure the plateau residents are consistently informed in a matter beyond Facebook.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we have been following that conversation. We have been wanting to see developers exceed that requirement just so that everybody in the area will have an opportunity to attend. And we've actually also looked at other possible venues, just sort of more accessible to individuals to attend. So we have taken those comments and passed them along, and we will continue to.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion? I put my agenda away here, sorry. 1 second. Are we looking at a motion to approve or to, what kind of motion are you looking for here, staff?
Well, I think we'd probably like for staff to go back and make or bring back any applicable changes as discussed today and bring the bylaw forward for readings. Now, do we need to do advertising for this at all? Is it?
No.
No? Okay. And we could bring it back to the 15th. I know there was a discussion, and council can let us know whether or not you want us to consider a major versus a minor for the environmental protection. I think that was one of the changes that was recommended. So that could be asking staff to do that.
Okay, so can I get a motion to that effect? Councillor Antonelli, seconded by Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Have a question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And I think that's it for that item. So thank you, Ms. Pedrini and Ms. Reese. And with that, we will look for, actually I'll adjourn committee of the whole, and we have 6 minutes until we go in camera.